Imagine a man carrying a stone. He is not young. His back is bent. His hands are wrapped in cloth because the skin cracked weeks ago and never healed. The stone weighs more than he wants to carry. The mountain beneath his feet is steep, and the wind from the north cuts through his thin clothing like something alive. He does not know where he is. He was taken from his village 3 months ago. He does not know if his family is still there. He does not know if he will ever return. He puts the stone down where he is told. He turns around and goes back for another one. Behind him, stretching east and west along every ridge and mountain as far as any eye can see, 1,000,000 men are doing exactly the same thing. What they are building will last 2,000 years. What it will cost them is everything.
There is a structure on this earth so large that for centuries people believed it could be seen from the moon. That claim, as it turns out, is not quite true. But the fact that human beings believed it, the fact that our minds reached automatically for the moon to find a scale large enough to hold this thing, tells you something about what the Great Wall of China is. 13,000 miles. That is the total length of all the walls built across Chinese history. All the sections, all the dynasties, all the repairs and expansions and rebuildings added together. 13,000 miles of stone and brick and rammed earth and wood, running across mountains and deserts and river valleys and plateaus. If you laid the Great Wall flat across a map of Europe, it would stretch from Lisbon to Moscow and keep going. It crosses 15 regions of China. It took more than 2,000 years to build. And at its peak construction, it employed, if that is even the right word, more than 1,000,000 human beings at the same time. One structure, 2,000 years, 1,000,000 lives.
To understand why it was built, you have to understand fear. China in the 3rd century before Christ was not one country. It was a collection of warring kingdoms, each fighting the others for dominance. To the north, beyond the settled agricultural lands of China, lived the nomadic peoples of the steppe, the Xiongnu and others, horse warriors who moved with extraordinary speed across the open plains. They raided the Chinese settlements at the border. They took crops, livestock, people. They were fast and unpredictable, and the walls and ditches that individual kingdoms had built to stop them were not enough. In 221 BC, a man named Ying Zheng conquered all the warring kingdoms and unified China for the first time. He gave himself a new title. He called himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. And the first emperor looked north and understood the problem with complete clarity. The border was too long. The nomads were too fast. What China needed was a continuous barrier, not a series of disconnected walls, but a single unbroken line running along the entire northern frontier, from sea to desert, from mountain to plain. Something so long and so strong that no raiding party could simply ride around it. He ordered its construction immediately. The order was given in the capital. It reached the provinces as a command. The command reached the villages as soldiers. And in those villages, across the empire, men were taken. Not asked, taken. The conscription was total and merciless. Farmers were pulled from their fields before the harvest. Craftsmen were taken from their workshops. Prisoners were marched north in chains. Criminals were sentenced to the wall instead of execution, though for many, the difference was difficult to identify. Soldiers were stationed there for years, sometimes decades, with no prospect of return. The numbers are almost impossible to comprehend. At the height of construction under the Qin dynasty,
Historians estimate that between 300,000 and 1 million workers labored on the wall at the same time. Some estimates reach higher. The records from that era are incomplete, and the truth has been obscured by 2,000 years of distance. But what is certain is this: the scale of the human mobilization required to build this wall had no precedent in human history. The men marched north.
The wall was being built where walls are the hardest to build. The northern frontier of China is not flat. It is not simple. It runs across some of the most brutal terrain on Earth. The Gobi Desert to the west, where the temperature swings from burning to freezing between day and night. The Mongolian steppe to the north, where the wind never stops. The mountain ranges of Hebei and Shaanxi, where the ridges are so steep that simply standing on them requires effort. And to the east, the craggy coastline, where the wall eventually descends to the sea itself. The workers had no machinery, no cranes, no trucks, no concrete mixers. They had their hands, simple tools, chisels, hammers, wooden poles, and each other. Every stone that went into the wall was carried there by a human being. Every brick was fired in kilns built on site and then carried up the mountain slopes on the backs of workers or on the backs of animals. On the steepest sections, where the ridges were too narrow and too vertical for animals to manage, everything was carried by people. The wall follows the mountain ridges not despite the difficulty, but because of it. A wall on a ridge is harder to attack from below. The engineering logic was sound. The human cost was staggering. For every meter of wall built along those steep mountain faces, someone climbed that slope carrying stone. Thousands of times. Tens of thousands of times. They died on the wall. Not in small numbers, not as a tragic but acceptable cost. They died in numbers so vast that the Great Wall acquired a name in Chinese poetry and folklore. It was called the longest cemetery on Earth. The cold killed them. The northern frontier in winter is brutal, temperatures plunging far below freezing, winds that carry ice from the steppes of Central Asia. The workers had inadequate clothing, inadequate food. They were fed just enough to keep working. When they could not work anymore, they were replaced. The labor killed them, carrying stone up mountain ridges for 12, 14, 16 hours a day destroyed bodies within weeks. Injuries were constant. Medical care was almost non-existent. A broken bone on the wall was frequently a death sentence. The disease killed them. Men crowded together in temporary camps with no sanitation, inadequate water, no way to quarantine illness. Dysentery, typhoid, respiratory infections swept through the work camps the way fire sweeps through dry grass. And when they died, this is the part that passed into legend. There was no easy way to remove the bodies. The wall was being built in remote mountain terrain, far from any city, far from any proper burial ground. And so it is said, and some archaeological evidence has supported this, that the bodies of workers were incorporated into the wall itself, buried in the foundations, sealed inside the structure they had died building. The wall, in this telling, is not merely built on bones. It is made of them. The Qin dynasty that ordered the first great construction lasted only 15 years after the first emperor's death, but what it started could not be stopped. Dynasty followed dynasty. Each new emperor looked at the wall and saw both what it was and what it was not yet. They extended it, they repaired it, they reinforced sections that had crumbled and added watchtowers that allowed signals to be relayed by fire from one end of the empire to the other. A smoke signal in the daytime, a fire at night.
A message could travel thousands of miles in hours. The Han Dynasty expanded the wall westward into the desert. The Sui Dynasty conscripted 1 million men to rebuild and extend it, and reportedly lost half of them. The Jin Dynasty built walls against the Mongols, and then the Mongols arrived anyway. Genghis Khan and his successors swept over and around and through the walls that were supposed to stop them, because no wall is stronger than the human decisions made on either side of it.
The wall as most people picture it today, the wide stone walkway along the mountain ridge, the battlements, the watchtowers with their distinctive crenellated tops, that version was built primarily during the Ming Dynasty, between the 14th and 17th centuries. The Ming spent an enormous portion of their imperial resources on the wall. It was their defining national project. The bricks of the Ming Wall were stamped with the name of the kiln that produced them and the name of the official responsible, a quality control system, so that if a section failed, someone could be held accountable. Someone was always accountable for the wall, except for the men who built it. The wall today is one of the most visited places on Earth. Millions of tourists climb the stone steps at Badaling and Mutianyu every year. They take photographs. They look north from the battlements and see the mountains and the sky and the wall disappearing into the distance in both directions. They feel something: awe, wonder, the particular sensation of standing inside history. What they are standing on is largely a reconstruction. Much of the Ming Wall that tourists visit has been restored in the 20th century. The original stones beneath are still there, but the experience of visiting the wall, the clean stone steps, the safety railings, the souvenir shops at the base, is not quite the experience of the thing itself. The thing itself is further out. It is the Wild Wall, sections that have never been restored, that crumble along the ridgelines of remote mountains, overgrown with grass and moss, worn down by 2,000 years of wind and rain. These sections are harder to reach. There are no tour buses, there are no souvenir shops. There is only the stone and the mountain and the silence of something immense and old, and carrying a weight that has nothing to do with its physical mass. Stand on those sections, and you can feel it. The silence of 1 million men. There is a question that the Great Wall asks that no tourist brochure answers. What are we willing to build, and who are we willing to make pay for it? The Great Wall is one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. It is also one of the greatest demonstrations of what happens when power has no limit and human life has no value. The emperors who built it were not monsters in the simple sense. They were rulers, doing what rulers do, building what they believed their nations needed, paying whatever price was necessary. The price was paid by people who had no choice. 2,000 years later, we stand on what they built and take photographs. The man with the cracked hands and the heavy stone, he does not appear in the photographs. He does not appear in the history books. He does not have a name that survived. But somewhere inside that wall, somewhere in the foundations of the most famous structure on Earth, he is still there. He put the stone down where he was told. He never came home. If you believe that stories like this should not be forgotten, stories of what human beings are capable of building and what human beings are capable of forgetting, subscribe to The Archivist. Every story we tell is an attempt to remember what was buried. Thank you for being here.